all amongst friends anyway. Right. So that's how the habit started. And my early readings, like probably all of us, was around Secret Seven, Famous Five. Went into westerns on Louis L'Amour, and then we had the season of reading James Hadley Chase. Of course, I had to get a newspaper and cover the book and read it. Otherwise, my mom wouldn't like those pictures, and we had to do that. And after that, another good series that I really liked was Earl Stanley Gardner's Perry Mason series. They were all lawyers and case mysteries kind of a thing. A beautiful series. Like I think if not for an engineer, I would have loved to become a lawyer kind of thing. Except for the reputation that Krishna College has in Vizag for lawyers, that it's all the leftover crowd. Maybe that's why I didn't get into law. But it was really fascinating. And this fiction journey then continued till school and plus two and into engineering. But after engineering, it fell apart. Probably I couldn't spare time with the IIM rigor kind of thing. So on fiction, I think the three best books that I've read are Jeffrey Archer's Cain and Abel. It's an amazing book, and it's all about two individuals growing up in different parts of society and how they grow up and take different paths, how it meets, and tremendous amount of competition and stuff like that. He's a great storyteller. The other book is Larry Collis. It is called Fall from Grace. Larry Collis and Dominic Lapierre, they actually write historical books. Like they write Over Jerusalem, Is Paris Burning, and Freedom at Midnight is one of their best books. But when they separated, Larry Collis wrote a fiction called Fall from Grace. In fact, you don't get that book. If you get it, do pick it up and send me a copy also. And it's an amazing espionage story kind of a thing. It's just that two people, major agents, and they're just on either side of the Cold War friends, and but they're doing the same job for their own country, and spying and counter spying and all of that stuff. You get to hear about it. And then there is Eric Siegel. Eric Siegel's The Class. That's another amazing book. So, like I said, till engineering, it was good. I had a good collection, and I went out to Cal, and my good friend, my younger brother, then started to distribute my novels all over the place. When I came back, nothing was left. And then we and after IIM, when I joined in TCS, that's when the habit kickstarted again, and it is purely because almost everyone, all the entire TCS management, be it Mr. Kohli, Mr. Ramdurai, and Mr. Malingam, all of them, they always had a couple of books in hand. And these were the days of wallpapers and some files and some books, but there was always a book hanging. And that's how I started to, the habit started to pick up once again. And if you look at books, the genres that are there, which we would have all gone through, is there are fiction books, there are non-fiction. You can look at technical, there are technical books, management books, and there is a breed that comes in between called business reference books kind of thing. And most of my books are in that. It's essentially business books with experiential writing. So that's how they serve more like a reference. They are not like standard textbooks on a supply chain or anything, but it is content plus experiential thing. There are some good books on philosophy and spirituality kind of a thing. So honestly, it doesn't matter what genre you pick up. The language also shouldn't matter. You just pick up your passion and explore kind of thing. And like I said, I've been reading mostly business reference, and the other category I'll come to you, and which is even more fascinating. So in business reference, you started to read around management, leadership, strategy. I think for whatever reason, I think maybe because of the job need necessities, or because of my genuine interest, or wanted to move away from fiction itself. So we started to work on the business references itself, and then it slowly went on to innovation, consulting and design thinking. Currently, the art business storytelling is a big thing, so, and that's where everything will move to. The whole world is moving from theory to creativity, and then that is why design thinking and business storytelling, all of these start to become popular. And then somewhere in between, I also developed the habit of creating book summaries. This was in 2004 2008. I actually, for some of the books, I have PPT versions from end to end. So they serve as a nice reference. I'm happy to share them if it's of interest to you guys. And like I said, the biggest thing that I picked up in the last 4 5 years, and I really love them, is to read biographies. Now, when you read biographies, it could be biographies of organizations or individuals also, or even autobiographies. And there is tremendous amount of learning that happens when you start to read biographies. Like when you read IBM's Father, Son and Co., or Toyota's revolution that they did with the quality circle, The amazing book on Tata Group, Shashank Desai. It's got beautiful stories, all Indian stories, very early Tata stories on charity, funding, and competition, and so on and so forth, and the whole business ethic that they stick to from generations to generations. I think. On individuals, the Walter Isaacson is an amazing author, and I really love his biographies. Steve Jobs is a beautiful one, and even more better is Leonardo da Vinci. I would say if you have one book to read in this year, it's a very big book, and it takes effort to read it, but you should read Leonardo da Vinci at some point. Like, if we think we are engineers in today, probably he's done it all in every aspect, be it engineering, military, rocket science, or humanity, genome, you name it, he's done it. Project management, art, and it's a beautiful book. And the book that I'm currently reading is Barack Obama's Promised Land. I think friends, folks in US, probably you might have had enough of him or just trying to get over it. But maybe give it some break, and then if you try to get back to it, you will get a lot of insights into how he went about his early childhood, his growing up years, getting into politics, and so on and so forth. And like I said, there is tremendous amount of learning that happens. I mean, Porter's, with all of it, he's got the same day-to-day challenges like you and me or all of us have. What is it? Whether the kids are asleep, are they eating? The pressures of Michelle complaining or encouraging both ways. You're not doing enough for the family, you're always out, so on and so forth. So the problems are not much different, whether it is at our level or whether it is the president of the United States. Those basic problems always remain, kind of thing. So those give you tremendous insights into the individuals. And when you read the business biographies, you also get a sense of the timing of it, of when it happened. Like when I was reading Goldman Sachs history, you get to learn the entire financial services industry from the old promissory notes to bonds and debts and so on. Or if you read a book on Benetton, and they revolutionized the way they created the ads and the Italian business, the family business world, how it happens. When we read mergers and acquisitions, another amazing book is Taken for a Ride. It is all about Mercedes and Daimler Chrysler and Mercedes-Benz merger that happened when it became Mercedes, when they picked up that Daimler-Benz as a name for it. And you would find all sorts of the deal went so high, and it was so secretive. A posh London club, Dorchester club, was booked the entire floor for 3 months, and then they had an assurance that the moment it leaks, we'll check out all of it. Kind of. So that is how it was built up. And lastly, when the chairman of Mercedes and Chrysler, they actually fight over what to call the name. Should it be Daimler Chrysler or Chrysler Daimler? Like, I think it was Bob Hope or someone. I'm not sure what the name of Chrysler. Finally, he had to be convinced that just take it like Daimler Chrysler, because that sounds better as opposed to Chrysler Daimler, like it's a tongue twister kind of thing. So you get to learn a lot of these things, and they always come in handy wherever, kind of thing. So on the business side, went through books of Kaplan, Chan Kim, who writes the Blue Ocean Strategy. Another beautiful author is Clayton Christensen. He writes amazing books on innovation, disruptive innovation, which all of us would have heard about. But an offbeat book of his is that how do you measure success? And that's a beautiful book as to how do you define success for yourself and how do we want to look at it, kind of thing. On consulting, there's a author called David Meister. By the way, I think I have this on a small PPT. I'll share that. Don't worry if you don't capture all the names. David Meister is a guy who writes a lot on the professional services. He's like a porter of the marketing world in consulting, kind of a thing. I spoke about Walter Isaacson. I do read contemporary Indian historians like Shashi Tharoor to some extent and Ramchandra Guha. And I didn't explore the books that the old and the true historians that Sudesh also referred to, David Patnaik or a few others. I can't recall the names. And the only Telugu author that I managed to read, and this was also way back at a very slow pace, was, I think it was Yandamuri Virendra or Virendranath, kind of. And I think again was an amazing fiction writer, and the kind of research that he does into science or whatever he writes, he's almost like Alistair MacLean, where Alistair MacLean in his fiction, the first 50 pages he describes only the place itself, kind of thing. And this guy had that that caliber to write about it. Like, so that's on the book. And then, so how does one start about it? Like, so I would say just pick it up, pick any book. Every book that you have, there is a blurb or a back at the back. There is a small synopsis of it. Read that. Read the inside story. You'll get a summary of it. You can look at the contents. You can look at the author bio, and somewhere something should resonate for you, as saying that okay, maybe I want to give this a try, kind of a thing. So it can start small. Read few pages at a time. As a habit builds up, you can start to read more and more, and it'll start to become an addiction. Like select a time. Selecting a time is very important, so that you can mark out a certain time and then start to do your reading. I try to do it. I reserve my time for before bedtime. It's a little bit relatively crowd. It's a nice way to unwind. More importantly, it keeps you away from blue screen, and it's good to go before sleep. And above all, the greatest benefit that this whole book reading can give all of us at this age of 50 plus is that it keeps us away, it keeps our brain active and keeps us away from Alzheimer's. Like, and this has been told to us many a time. And if you can couple this with writing a journal, just write a journal. I mean, it may not be a formal diary, but if you, as you write, I myself don't write anything. I mean, it's all on laptops and gadgets, so we don't write. But I still try to write a small journal of, I mean, like a semi-diary kind of a thing in your own words. But the whole point is that as you keep your, mind and motor skills active, your brain is active, and it will keep you away from Alzheimer's. And I think that's the biggest benefit. And obviously, no reading goes waste, and every reading will come in extremely handy in your consulting career. Like, so that's a few thoughts I wanted to share on reading. So why don't I pause now, and we'll just take a couple of questions or counter thoughts. Like,
Anybody?
Hey Mohan, I have to say everything about St. Aloysius and all the books you read is when I first started reading my books. So I just, I vouch for that.
yep, right. It did help. Like, right.
Yeah,
The
all the
one extra series I did was the Biggles. I don't know if you did
Oh
Biggles.
yeah, right. Yeah, because
Yep, please
I think
continue.
all the authors that you mentioned, Mohan, like probably many of us went through the whole list. It's amazing that I mean the similarity that I can see at least like amongst this group. Probably one question that I have is like I mean honestly, while growing up in school and till engineering college, like I was a voracious reader. After getting another job, like it started slowly, it went down, right? And after coming to the US and getting another job and life getting busy, went down and down. So, how was it your professional need that kept you in the reading habit, or was it your own interest? I mean, I'm curious to know.
right. Right. No, it's a good question. It's actually the professional need, Sam, because I mean, again, on the career side, I think I posted a small message a few days or something. So when I came into consulting, I was back in India, and I had this passion for teaching. So I used to conduct reports for TCS in-house training I used to do. And we started to recruit MBAs from B schools. So we set up their program, and for that, at least I had to keep myself abreast, and honestly trying to set up the consulting thing. I think that you're bang on, Sam. It is a professional compulsion that probably made me go. Which is why the books that I read also are all on that same business and business reference. Like, I couldn't go back to fiction at all. Like, I mean, I still can't do it. I dabble with philosophy a bit, but it comes back. Like, right. Okay. So with that, we'll move to our second theme, and then we'll try to play it like this, guys. I'll spend about 10 minutes, and we'll spend about 2-3 minutes on taking a couple of questions. Like, so now when we go to consulting, again, taking cue from where I left on Sam's question. So having spent time in delivery and then sales and coming back into consulting, finding my passion there, and getting a commitment to make it happen, it kind of helped out in many ways, kind of a thing, right? So when we look at consulting, by the way, there are consultants here, and we are all experienced in our whole domains, kind of a thing. It's not something that you would have consulted or you've interacted with consultant. You've been on either side of the bridge of the table, but consulting, it's all about advisory services. And then this can be either a strategy consulting, business, functional, or domain. And that is where I think many of us can pick it up, because all of you are in different fields, be it on the oil field or telecom field, you would have developed some tremendous amount of, domain knowledge that is there. And that core skill is always much more valuable. And by the way, that is extremely critical for the big four consulting firms. So, for me to do an IT strategy consulting and for a bank, for me, vis-a-vis someone who's been in the banking industry, he will beat me hollow, because domain skill is a first level filter for any consultant kind of thing. So then there are technology consulting, and there is the operational consulting kind of thing, and which is on infrastructure or the tech side of things. And like I said, it's a beautiful second career option, and I think we are all close there, and that's where it happens. Now, in the consulting world, it's a three-legged stool, and it requires a balance between a client, consultant, and the end customer itself, kind of, because whatever you do between yourself and the client, if it doesn't resonate with his end customer, then the whole engagement will backfire. So therefore, the customer is equally important,
Right.
and getting this balance becomes extremely critical.
Just మెసేజ్ వస్తే చూస్తే 9:30కి మీటింగ్.
Venkat, can you be right? Thanks, Venkat. Right, right. So it's a three-legged stool, and consulting is all about challenging the assumptions, kind of a thing. So, I mean, there is a famous saying which says that, I mean, this is from Alec Padamsey, the Linta's chairman, I mean, the ad world guru. Like he says, leave no answer unquestioned. Like, okay, it's not finding answers for the question, but it is questioning every answer, is what he says. Like, okay, and any consulting engagement, irrespective of the type of engagement of the field in which it is in, it typically goes through about 5 phases. Like you start by understanding the context. Why are they going through this particular project? And that is critical. Don't assume that it is for so-and-so region. One of the common mistakes that all IT consultants make for any outsourcing engagement, we assume that it's cost arbitrage. It need not be. Maybe there is a regulation impact that is there. So therefore the client, IT guys have to be moved to the business side, and the IT operations have to be outsourced to TCS or Infi or whoever kind of thing. So understanding context. Then from there you look at the current state assessment to see what the level of play, what is the aptitude to change, and what should the target state be. And then you do the gap between the current and the to be, simple things, and it ends up with a recommendation. Now the consulting cycle, it is called a cycle because it is truly cyclic. It is not sequential. When a new CIO or a CEO takes up, he might say that, hey, look, I don't have time. Can you do a quick run? And in a week, you need to tell me, how does my organization look like? So I might just do an understanding context and a current state and give him recommendations. Or he might say that, look, I need to enter into this, growth markets or the Asia Pacific. So what is my potential there? Can I go to the target market? So that is why it is called cyclic kind of a thing. So that is how it happens. Now, I'm trying to keep this a little bit generic, and I'll share with you the consulting skills that are relevant for any type of consultant. And this is predominantly from the chapter 10 of my first book, and that's probably the only chapter that everybody likes, is that in consulting, you need to cultivate the habit to step back and strategize. It might be sounding cliched that, you view the forest instead of the trees, get the big picture, but that becomes extremely critical. The reason is that we tend to dive in and debug in our enthusiasm to show that we know it all, we can solve it, and you're a dumb guy, I can solve your problems, so on and so forth. So, but the real strength is that speed to solve is not a strength. And again, so we all come from the tech world. So we were programming. And if I can write a piece of code in 1,000 lines, and if Sudesh can write it in 100 lines of code, that's Sudesh's USP. The moment he tells me how to write the code in 100 lines, then he loses his USP and he loses his competitive advantage. So we are all taught to mold it ourselves to keep everything protected to us. Everything that we learned, we assume that it's a Nobel Prize winning piece of work, and we don't share. This is counterproductive in consulting. Okay, the more you need to share to succeed. So today, if I share these thoughts with you, then you will know that, okay, I more know something about consulting, you know something about design thinking, and that is how I become known more, and it is a tremendous skill to have. You need to harvest in hourglass analytics. So what happens in consulting is that sometimes you might get a one-line statement and say that, okay, how do I become the best bank in this region? That's all he tells you. So using that one-line statement, you need to go divergent and explore everything that is under the web and come back to him and tell him how he should become that. Or alternatively, he can say that, here are my competitors and here are the ERP vendors or SAPs or Oracles. What is the best ERP to me, kind of a thing. So that's when it becomes the opposite. It becomes a convergent technology. So that's what I call it's an hourglass analytics that becomes thing. The other things are, very generic. We've all been taught, inculcate the fine art of listening. It's extremely important. You need to observe and absorb everything. You need to recapture the curiosity of a child. Like, okay. Another important thing is that progressive approximation. This is a problem with all of us Indians, and as we interact with Westerners, you find that they are quick to jump the gun. They're quick to give answers, kind of thing, and we hesitate. We hesitate because the fear of failure is there within us. It's ingrained in us in through parents or through teachers or schooling system and so on and so forth. Like, so without a clue, the other guy on the table, he'll start to give answers, whether they're right or wrong, God knows. Like. So, and I think we need to switch ourselves. So this is what I call as progressive approximation. With the current information, you say what it is. Nobody's going to hold you to it, right? And then as you learn more, you change your assumption. And in the consulting world, another thing that equally matters, you would have seen people coming, the attire, accessories, and attitude all matter. Like, I mean, whether it's your suit or briefcase or your gadget or your watch or whatever, it does make a difference. I mean, people look at it. It's sad, it's materialistic, but yes, that's how that world works. Okay, so that's on the consulting skills. Now, with that skills, what is different in selling consulting? So if I had to look at understanding sales, consulting sales, you need to understand the sales trigger. And this is again the same example that I told you about outsourcing and jumping to conclusion, assuming that it's a cost advantage that he's looking for. Like, you need to gauge who are all your stakeholders, like, and you need to have a balance with all of them, but amongst them, there is always one influencer within the organization or one influencer who's pro your company or yourself, kind of a thing. So you need to synchronize with all stakeholders and you need to align with the influencer. Like, you should never underestimate the client or the competitors. Like, I'm saying client because when I interact with CIOs, most of them are ex-consultants. They all come from the worlds of Accentures or CAP and everyone. So they know the consulting as much as we do. Okay, so I can't fool around with them. And in all of it, you need to demonstrate individual equity, kind of a thing. Okay, if I go meet a new CIO, if I tell him I'm from Tata Group, I'm from TCS has got this beautiful product, and by the way, I can do this for you. So now all of that is excess baggage. Like, if you did not have anything, you will not even get an appointment with the CEO. The fact that you got an appointment is because you have some merit, and now they want to hear how you can solve it. So the individual equity is all that matters. If I go tell him that, like I said, if it's a regional bank of Latin America that we're trying to do, and if I tell him, hey, I have experience in banks, but my experience is with Indian bank, he said, thank you, send me someone who's worked in Latin America. It doesn't matter even if I have 30 years of a consulting experience or whatever kind of a thing. For him, what he needs is that his core need, kind of a thing. So that is extremely critical. Okay, and in consulting, it's not about problem solving. You will not get a problem statement. You will get a problem hypothesis. It is never about problem solving. It is all about future positioning, kind of a thing. So these are the pointers that we need to keep in mind in a consulting sale. And moving on from sales, if you go into consulting delivery, then it's all about making the right impact. You should have a one-on-one conversation with your sponsor. You will get to know all the unspoken words, the dynamics, the people dynamics, the stakeholders, who they are, what they are, all of that, background, personal information you will get, which comes in very handy as to how you interact with people, how do you extract information, kind of thing. Then you workshop with all the stakeholders together. Typically, you can always have one-on-one interviews, but after you do a combined workshop, the reason we want to do that is that through that, you balance out your pro people, your against people, different stakeholders. You create a sense of ownership amongst them. You try to get a collective opinion. So therefore, once you are able to do that, then your whatever you recommend will be taken forward. And some of your opponents, you might be able to convert them into your evangelists also, kind of a thing. So we do that. And once we do that as a first step, you need to start to ask the right questions, customizing your questionnaires. You should be prepared for hostility. Sometimes people will not answer you, people will backbite, and so on and so forth. You need to be careful about the personal dynamics. and you must minute every interview and share it within 24 hours and ask them to confirm it within 48 hours, like, because that becomes your basis for every recommendation that you do in the final stage. So then you can tell them that when you find the right answers, you should have fact-based analysis, you should have forward and backward traceability. So if someone says, okay, hey, this is not how we are, then I can able to say that, okay, person X in your department has said this, like this is his statement, his signed and approved minutes. And the reason I'm giving you this recommendation going forward, how this will help you, is because this will solve this particular problem. So it is both ways. And as you grow in the organization, as you interact with C-level executives, you have to honor, organizational sensitivities. I mean, there were times when I had to do engagements within the CEO's room itself. I mean, there was nobody available, and I was like, hounded off through a private lift and all such stuff. And it's nice, you feel nice, but you feel scared also at times, kind of thing. Okay, and then once you're done with the work, it's about presenting your findings. There, you should remember that you should be able to present everything in no time. You get a half an hour slot, it might be cut down to 5 minutes, and the stakeholders might change. We went to a presentation where the CFO was ahead. We thought that we had to tell him everything on financials. We cooked up beautiful analysis ratios and all that stuff, and he couldn't join the meeting. And the next in command was a tech guy, and then I had to switch from financial ratios to an infrastructure, comms networks, and parameters and configurations kind of thing. So we never know what happens and how it shapes up, kind of a thing. Okay, and you need to learn to think on your feet. You will get very uncomfortable answers, very personal answers. There might be a person sitting in the room, and the big boss might ask, okay, what do you think of the CEO, or a board member might ask, what do you think about my CIO? Like, how do you answer that question? Because he's the one who has to sign your bill and give you the check also. You can't tell him he's an idiot or he hasn't solved the problem, and you can't praise him either. So then you may not be seen as objective. Like, so thinking on your feet, I mean, that becomes very critical. Diplomatically answering it, how do you solve it? Give a balanced answer, and to escape, to move on, kind of things becomes. And as you move the consulting measures, it's all about how your stakeholders are satisfied and what is the quantum of business impact. Are your recommendations being implemented? Don't assume that just because you give beautiful recommendations and a beautiful report and everybody tap you on the back to cure for drinks, they might just file the report. They might not even implement it. Like, okay. And equally important from every engagement is that for you or for your company is that you need to make a note of all the learnings from that engagement. How do you can improve yourself or your organization or your offerings? In terms of maturity, how do you start by becoming a simple problem solver when you're a team member. Then you go to, it's like 1 + 1 = 2. You become a value provider. You say that 1 + 1 is 3 or 11. Then you become a thought leader. You can say that 1 + 1 is a stupid question. You should not even answer that. Like, and then from a thought leader, you might become a trusted advisor. And that's when you might even say that 1 + 1 is actually -3 kind of a thing. So, and you should have that kind of a confidence to say that you're doing the wrong thing actually. In consulting, the success is all about your ability to empower the enterprise kind of a thing. It's the greatest achievement of any consultant. In one assignment towards the final presentation, when I told them that, look, I'll be the most happiest person if you don't call me again. Like, I mean, my sales guy was sitting beside, he almost wanted to jump out of the 10th floor, but that's the kind of a confidence that you can leave with him, so that in your work, and if he has learned it, at least he should not come back to you for the same problem kind of thing. So that is what is a real measure of consulting success kind of thing. Probably I'll just share some couple of assignments that we have done, which were very very fulfilling. Is that we did an engagement for a European telecom, and that's where they wanted to set up their India operations. Like, and they said that it's a European based thing, and their India headquarters or the global headquarters was in London. Like, they said, okay, we want to set up India operations for our R&D and IT and all that stuff. It's a mobile company, but our headquarters is in London, so we want to set up the India operations there. Like, so we actually went against the RFP, and we told them that, okay, that is not how we should do it. You should do it only in India kind of a thing. I mean, thankfully, I had the permission from my boss, the vice president, who said, okay, go ahead. If you want to challenge it, challenge it. Like, and we actually got shortlisted, though we challenged the very basic premise of their direction. Like, and then we submitted the proposal and we went for the final presentations. And that presentation was very rigorous. Like, it's almost like a daily shortlist. Like, so there were 10 vendors on day 1. You do the first round of 10, then 5 get shortlisted on day 2. And so you have to, it's a sleepless night. You wake up the next day to figure out whether you made it to the shortlist. I mean, should I pack and take a flight or stay on for another presentation? and then again. So it goes so on and so forth. It went on for a week, and one of the most challenging assignment that was, and we got selected for I mean rather teachers got selected for that engagement. And the crowning on that is that look, we are, I mean, when he says that we're happy to give you this engagement, but will you lead this engagement? It's almost like, okay, if you're there, teachers will get it. If you're not there, teachers will not get it, kind of thing. And that as much as heady as it was, and as kind of a proud moment it was, you still had to say that no, that's not how the organization works, kind of thing. I think being recognized at that level is extremely important. The second illustration I can share is around the. I spoke about observing and absorbing, and trying to listen and so on and so forth. So we did this, and coming from reading and seeing places, observing and so on and so forth. Like, so there was this Brussels, it's a diamond certification agency, and the thesis was trying to get a breakthrough there, because the CEOs and the board members there are very powerful lobby in the entire European Commission. Like, so the engagement is dollar value is minimal, it's just about 100K, but that's beside the point. But getting a breakthrough there and getting their mind share became critical. And I actually went for another engagement, and they said, okay, can we go meet this guy? Like, said, don't do anything. We'll just go out for an evening, have a meeting for dinner and have a drink, and see if you can talk to him if there's some potential open opportunities. And this was with their chief operating officer. Like, so we went and met him, kind of a thing. And the conversations were very casual, kind of. It was a Brussels-based thing, and I think it's coincidental that day morning I went to one of those, had some time off in the weekend and went to the art museum there. And P.P. Rubens is a famous, painter in the Antwerp area, and he draws some amazing pictures all about the Christian art, kind of a thing. And he's got a beautiful technique. He, it's like, when you draw a painting, it's like face down. It becomes a two-dimensional thing. And what his trick he does is that in every portrait, he makes one figure in an inclined way. Like, the moment you make one figure inclined, it gives a depth to the whole picture. Like, so that was his trick. Like, so anyway, we went through this meeting, and we were casually, doing some small talk. That becomes very important, whether you want to talk small talk on art or painting, or cricket, or American European soccer, or whatever. Like, I mean, golf or whatever kind of thing. So I think so slowly, we kind of built up, and then he opened up and said, hey, I have this engagement. It's a very confidential. We need to do it. Can you help out? And we patiently listened to him, and I told him, look, this is on Wednesday. I'm leaving to India on this weekend. Give me time till next Wednesday, and we will get the engagement. We'll get the proposal across to you. And only then he gave me his visiting card. And to the local colleagues, I mean, that was like half the battle won for them, even to get his visiting card. Like. And we actually won that engagement. We did it. It was a beautiful presentation we made. And the CEO, again, the same scenario that I talked about, the CEO asking, should I fire my CIO, kind of thing. And we actually had to do it, and I was scared to go the next time back again. But that was another cherishing engagement. And when we got good feedback from the board members, who actually said we never knew that TCS is in consulting and they could do such a work with some realistic recommendations. Okay, so it's time out once again, guys, and a couple of quick questions I can take.
Vijay has a question in the chat.
Yeah, go ahead, Vijay.
No, Vijay had already posted a question in the chat. You want to read it?
Okay. That's lots to scroll, Vijay. If you can ask Vijay if you're unmute and ask me, please.
What are your thoughts on comparing different consulting companies like money, jobs, or services?
Right. So,
yeah, that's from me, Mohan, which is Murti Garimela. Basically, the reason I think you have covered that part from a typical consulting company. But let us take, for example, I want to be another side. Let us say I'm the CEO or I am a CFO, and I have these two companies, company A and company B, consulting, and let us say TCS or Wipro, it doesn't matter, any company. If I have that, and they are kind of shortlisting, as you mentioned before, what is the criteria or value add, like a particular company I can look into? Of course, money could be one thing, but nowadays that is anyway, every company is coming down. But what are your thoughts? I want to pick your brain.
Right. So Vijay, see, It's the most important thing, Vijay. Like I said, it's the experience that matters, kind of a thing. The organizational experience in that space, or if you're working as a freelance consultant, it is the individual equity which primes over everything, right? So that becomes the single most critical factor. Okay. Second thing would be is that in terms of how practical your recommendations could be, and many a time when TCS or any IT service providers or Indian consulting firms win over the big four, is because we can put our foot forward and say that, look, I'll be with you in implementing these recommendations. Many of the big consulting firms, be it the McKinsey's or Boston, the Booz and Boston, BCG and all, they provide a consulting report, and that's where it ends, kind of a thing. So they do a strategic report at a very high level, and many a time they're not, the companies do not know what to do with them. Like, so some of the engagement that we did were actually that itself. So I had to take a PwC report and tell him how to convert that into an actionable recommendations, kind of thing. So they had to wait. So it's your individual experience in that domain, in that field, in the geography, and your experience in that similar projects, and your ability to give those things. And the other thing that will happen is that, as you interact, the customer will be able to gauge you in terms of how much I can trust you, kind of a thing. Okay, and that becomes, trust becomes another extremely important factor, kind of a thing. And you never know how to play with the trust, kind of a thing. So once when we were working with LA Times, it's again another big group company on in the media industry. And this was again 10 years back, kind of thing. And the only way we could convince them is to equate the LA Times and the hereditary to heritage into Tata Group and the Tata Trust and so on and so forth. So somewhere we need to be able to make that connect, and where you will find a sponsor and he will be willing to bet his dollar on you or your organization and to work with you and to take it forward.
Very good, Mohan. And this is Badri. Very nice
Hi.
explanations. Good to see you. Great job, Mohan. So Murthy's question, I want to add to that, like, you said, like, this is experience from 10 years back. Do you think that, it still holds, like, this kind of competition? Because see, I recently saw a $500 million competition bids between Infosys and other companies, they're fearful, like, with American companies. So individual, this thing, yes, that goes, but, in a large bid, like a 500 million or $1 billion, even like, big companies, like, $3 to $4 billion, when IBM, all these big guys are fighting. Do you think that the time has changed now, like, because of the fierce competition and then the dollar value, like, in the sense, like the dollar amount?
What happens, by the way, is that if you look at the large deals and the large bids, kind of a thing, so even when TCS wins, these days each transaction, there are bids which are won on $1 billion on one project, kind of thing. So there, I think the big companies survive because most of these, they end up signing up for a 10-year contract. It's a long-term contract, that is there. Whereas which the smaller companies may not be able to afford the kind of a volume or sustenance. We don't know whether they'll be there for the life. But that's on the scale of a problem, if the scale of the deal itself. But if you take a small engagement, even if it's a $250,000 pure play consulting deal, there, niche guys, individual consultants can beat them down, kind of a thing. And that is where, Badri, it's like a nice shift for us to move on to the next topic. So the skills that are required today, be it in teaching or for all of us, is that, let's look at it. We all have 20-plus-year-old kids, kind of a thing, or all in their masters or graduates, kind of thing, right? Now, when they are going to college and when they're learning, there is nothing that they don't know. There is nothing that is not available to them. The teaching probably is the hardest job today, kind of thing. So how do you teach those guys? It is only experience that matters, kind of a thing. And how do you convert yourself? Another skill that is important is that we always need to upskill and cross-skill ourselves. We need to keep on reskilling ourselves, kind of thing. Today, the only thing that's going to sell is that everything that we do can be automated. AI, machine learning, robots, it's all going to take over. That's a given. Yeah. Amazon's 30% of their workforce is robots, kind of, and it'll only keep increasing. Right? Yeah. So the only thing that we can beat them is in the thought process or in the creative side. That is why all the creative arts are now gaining more popularity in the guise of whatever be it. The design thinking is one such thing, and there are a lot of other things that are starting to happen, and there is these synergies of industries that are happening, kind of a thing. Today, if we are targeting one industry, the boundaries of industries are blurring. Like earlier, I used to sell a solution to an airline industry separately, and I used to then sell a solution to to a hotel industry separately. But then you have, let's say a yatra.com or makemytrip.com who's actually doing both of it. Like, so why can't I do it? And if I'm selling my advisories to, if I can create a package which can serve both, that's what will help. Like, so we need to start to look at these things. We need to find new avenues and to take it forward. Okay. Right. I think that's actually it's beautiful, guys. I mean, I'm getting the right question for me to switch to the next topic. Sam gave me the lead to the previous one, and now with your thought, I'll take you to the creative side of consulting or the creative skill. Okay. So we'll try and do this. Let's move on to design thinking. Okay. So like I mean, I did this consulting thing, and like I said, I write in the blurb where I say that the previous part, I mean, like Badri also said, it's a theoretical part, it's a classical view of consulting. Then I said, okay, how do I, and my first book tagline was how to succeed in IT consulting. If you succeed, what happens? How do I sustain? Then I thought, okay, now I need to bring some new thought, new thinking, because the previous book did not talk about digital, did not talk about cloud, did not talk about AI, machine learning, none of the new technologies. So how do I bring in a contemporary thought rather than going on the pure tech route? So I mean, it was coincidental. I found this, design thinking as a space, and generally some creative thing was there inherently. So it was nice, and it was a good learning. Like, so when we look at design thinking, and again here I'll quote Steve Jobs for you. He says that design is not just what it looks like and feels like. So we all assume it's all around the product or the service kind of a thing. Design is also about how it works kind of a thing. If it doesn't work, it doesn't matter kind of a thing. Right? So that is how it looks like. And design thinking has been there since 50s. Like, it became popular only in the 90s because of David Kelly, and he started a program in Stanford D School, or the design school. That's when they started a program, and then he, along with his brother Tom Kelly, they started Idea Firm. By the way, you can check out their YouTube videos on design. Some amazing stories are there on that. Like, and then and the core target of design thinking is that they try to look at what is the customer's unmet needs kind of a thing. Where is it that you haven't solved it? Like, okay, this also plays into Chan Kim and René Maubourdine's Blue Ocean strategy, where they say that, okay, Blue Ocean is that if it's like if you fight with your competition over price, then you both will kill each other and you create a red ocean. So you have to find new space, new white space, and so on and so forth. So those, in design thinking terms, they call it as the customer's unmet needs kind of thing. And then for that, it should be technically feasible, and then it should be business wise, and financially it should be viable kind of a thing. So that intersection of that Venn diagram is where the design thinking fits. I mean, this is the MIT's view of MIT's perception of design thinking. And some of the core concepts of design thinking are, it talks about human-centered design, that for everything that we do, it should be the human or the individual, or more importantly, the end customer should be on focus. You should have empathy towards the end customer. There will always be ambiguity, you should honor it. There will always be diversity, you should manage it. You need to co-create. You can never do things alone. Like, okay, it's a sandbox that all of us co-create and collaborate. You need to ideate, build upon each other's ideas kind of a thing. And you need to learn to fail fast, or prototype and keep failing kind of a thing. That's something that, almost all the, Silicon Valley, I mean, Googles and all, they keep trying to do it. They never penalize failure. In fact, they encourage failure. Right? Creating storyboards and telling a story. Storytelling is another art that is equally important in today's world. Like, building the recommendation through stories, kind of, right? So that is all core skills that you need. And then when we look at design thinking in products, it's proven. Like, we all know product and the designs work. Design thinking in services, it's evolving. But in consulting, it's a radical kind of a thing. It's never tried, and everybody will laugh at it. And I found that answer for me in design thinking consulting through Roger Martin's knowledge funnel. He's a Canadian Rotman School prof. I mean, he's retired now, and he wrote a book called Design of Business. And he talks about a knowledge funnel. It's a 3-stage process. And he says for design thinking to flow through, it moves from the top, from a mystery, which is the unknown, and it moves to heuristics, to finding patterns, and it moves to an algorithm or a formula kind of. And as you find patterns, as you work on them, you are able to define a set of formulas kind of a thing. And for me, I took the funnel as my meta model, and I said, for me, consulting, I position consulting itself as a mystery. Despite all the things that I talk about consulting, there are still lot of unknowns. Like, so for example, one mystery of consulting is that I told you about problem statement versus problem hypothesis. Problem hypothesis is what we all pick up, and we assume that that's a gospel truth, and we always want to go along with it. But and that's something that you and the client or the sponsor picked up kind of a thing, not for the end customer. But still, that becomes a gospel truth for your engagement outcome, objectives, and everything. Like, okay, so that's one mystery that you want to solve. The second mystery, from the heuristic is where I position the design thinking itself as a heuristic or the design grid. The design grid is my innovation or my IP that I did. It's nothing but a matrix of principles and practices. There are design principles like human-centered design, embracing ambiguity, and there are about 5 principles that we picked up. And that's the what of it. And every principle, how you do it is the practices. I mean, practices are your tools or techniques like empathy maps, how might we, and so on kind of a thing. Hey guys, I might be rushing a little bit because I do want to cover this topic before we sign off. We can skip the 4th, right? Anyway, so that's the heuristic or the patterns that we find. Lastly, it's the algorithm or the formula. Like, so what I did is that I built this grid with principles. I built this grid with principles and practices. And I said for every principle, there might be 2 or more practices that are relevant in general. That's a generic design grid. So we start with that. And I then take that grid to, I start my engagement. I'm in understanding context. So I then identify which of those 5 principles are best suited for understanding context. And for the chosen principles, which are the best practices. It's a little bit heavy, but bear with me. So I'm now able to build from a generic grid. I'm customizing that to my phase specific kind of thing. And once I know a phase specific grid, I can then say that, okay, here is what I can do for a strategy consulting or an outsourcing consulting. I'll give you a quick example. Like, so again, let's take the outsourcing consulting and the mystery of hypothesis, the outsourcing consulting. In outsourcing consulting, I've taken typically conventionally what happens is that, people go study the tech stack, they come back, they transition to it, and you forget about the client. And the guy who owns that application, you're leaving him in a limbo kind of, he's left in suspended animation. He had total ownership, he had accountability. Now suddenly his whole thing changes because some joker in India had taken away his job or his products kind of a thing. Now, if I want to change that, apply design thinking there, first I pick a human-centered design as one of the principles, and I try to reach out to the people and talk to them. Like, I pick empathy maps. Like, I can talk to different users to see how they are using that application, what are they doing, and so on and so forth. Now, if I get them on my side and if I co-create the solution, then whatever solution that I give them will not succeed, and you can also sustain it going forward because he is your stakeholder on the other side is now become a partner in your solution kind of a thing. So that is how you bring the human-centered element, you bring the end customer into the forefront, and you create a solution so that he will be taking it forward kind of a thing. Another good example in the product world is that when P&G was Procter & Gamble was launching Oral-B toothbrushes, they designed for the adults and the motorized, unmotorized, and they wanted to launch a toothbrush for infants, like 5-year-olds or under 10 years. Like, so an inside-out story, typical inside-out story is that they say, okay, all you need to do is that it's an 8-inch brush, you break it up into 4 inches, 1-inch bristles, you make it in a 1/2 inch, you make it slightly softer because it's kid, and they thought they could do it, but that didn't sell. It fell flat because this was designed in the R&D labs. Like, then when IDEO, the design thinking firm, went, they said, okay, it's not going to fall. So they go to the market, they talk to the end customer. They reached out to schools, they reached out to teachers, they reached out to parents, and maybe even talk to some few kids. Like, and then they discovered that it's an amazing thought. Like, and there are videos. Like, they said, okay, see, when adults, when we hold a toothbrush, we hold it with your fingers. Like, so you hold it with this and you can brush. Like, you give a brush to an infant, you're giving him let's say, 1 mm thin toothbrush. Infants, they hold the toothbrush like this. They hold it with a full palm. Now, many a time, and it is 8 inches, it falls off or it goes all over the place, the paste is falling off or something like that, or he doesn't even have a proper grip on it kind of a thing. That is when they discovered that what you really need is a short toothbrush. It's not a question of the size of the toothbrush or the size of the bristles, but what is really required is the thickness of the handle itself. Like, then they made the handle to be much thicker, and then they were able to hold it, and the kids were able to brush properly kind of a thing. The same technique was tried also with the peelers kind of a thing. I think the initial vegetable peelers or the fruit peelers were steel peelers, and they were thin handle. They used to slip. Old ladies or people with arthritis, they couldn't hold that. And then that's when the founder of the company itself, he went and he created a rubber handle with a thick handle kind of thing. So it gives you a better grip and with the surface and everything. So that is how design thinking got started to apply in various fields kind of a thing. And that is how it starts to happen. And this happened because you were able to reach out to the end customer, you were able to be empathetic toward the end user, and so on and so forth, kind of thing. So I mean, Badri, now if you roll back if you apply this thought to your old question, even if you want to beat a big company like IBM or something, even at a smaller company, you can always tell them that, look, when IBM brings you, you do not know who is working on the other side of IBM. There might be hundreds of people. I mean, only the partner will meet you, kind of a thing. Whereas, in my organization or me, I can meet your CEO, and I can meet your, ground floor worker. I'll fix the cables with you. I'm an electrical engineer. Don't worry about it. And hopefully you remember that. But yeah, anyway. So that becomes your USP, your personal touch, and that is where you are able to empathize with your client, and you can still win the deal, kind of a thing. So we're all moving from theory and experience to experiential kind of a thing. It's the same story, guys. I mean, theory and experience is all dead, kind of a thing. It's all experimental. Experiential focus is which we ought to do. I mean, that's the reason. I mean, look at it this way. I mean, I think none of our kids want to buy a house, kind of a thing. If you tell them, if you have $100,000, and you go buy a flat, they will never buy a flat. Like, you give him that same money, he'll tell you that, I'll go backpacking around the world and come back. Right? Okay, great. With that story, we'll pause again. I think we're on top of the hour also, but I will take a couple of questions.
Mohan, thanks for giving a good explanation on the design thinking. One of the questions that I have, and personally I face this, when we try to actually go in an organization and talk about design thinking and apply the principles of design thinking, there's a lot of resistance. So change management. So how do you really deal with this kind of thing?
Right. So Shyam, so one of the things that we are trying to switch is that this whole element of collaboration and co-creation. So we are always tuned to interviewing one-on-one interviews, or at best a small group, and so on and so forth, right? So we are trying to change that to a brainstorming session. So brainstorming is again a workshop. Brainstorming is one of the how or the practices of things. So if I'm able to bring different groups together, bring different thoughts to the picture, kind of a thing, and then in that workshop setting, in agile, or if you can go offsite, it's even better. If you do it in that informal setting, you'll be able to get different ideas. And then when we draw up the empathy maps, like, we ask the CEOs to cite their problems. Like, I mean, another good technique there is that value proposition canvas, where you talk about the pains versus gains, kind of a thing. At every level, we ask the CEO to state his pains, and then we ask the CIO to tell me if he's got a counter gain towards it, kind of a thing. So in real time, in the same in the same floor, in the conference room floor, you're able to get converse views, problems and solutions, ideas and counter ideas floating together in the same way, which is happening. Like, and this is actually what happens in the what do you call it, in the consulting world as conference room pilots, kind of thing. I cannot create a prototype as a product, but this is my best as far as I can go to a prototype. Like, Sam, you're in the architecture space, or the enterprise architect kind of a thing, right? So another beautiful example that I have is that, so when you conventionally do enterprise architecture design, you move from business to application to IT or technology, or then the infrastructure architecture, right? But then that's how conventionally it gets done. But let's say if you're doing that for an e-commerce firm like an Amazon or e-commerce site, or any of those e-commerce sites, kind of thing. Now, in the e-commerce world, at least for the Amazons, their biggest competitive advantage is that how fast is your response to a click. And they operate at 0.6 or 0.3 seconds. That's the kind of time that likes of Amazons and Flipkarts and all these guys try to operate like. So if you have to design an enterprise architecture for him and tell him, so conventionally you might still go down the same path. But as a design thinking person, as someone who knows the state of play, you will say that the real advantage is that I don't need your business problem is actually an infrastructure problem. Take me to the guy on the shop floor who does your comms and networks, and tell me, let him show me what his systems are and what his response times are like. He will have the real answer that what is the response time that his current systems can give him. Can it give him like 6 minutes, 0.6 seconds, 0.8 seconds? And if you fix that, automatically your business problem will get solved, and you don't need anything in between, kind of a thing. So that's how it plays out. So getting people together, co-creating, collaborating, it's a sandbox kind of a thing. initially there will be resistance, but as people come, they will let them loose, and you will the sessions are really lovely and lively, and you will and people will start to enjoy it, kind of a thing, and everybody will feel it like a nice welcome break. Like.
Thanks, Mohan.
Sure.
Let us do a time check. Our stipulated time is over. And depending on the guys, especially in India, it's about 10 o'clock now. So I want to see how long you want to continue, and or we can take it up on another session.
Hey, Sudesh, actually, let's pause. What we can do is that, maybe we can get some thoughts around, how this is working out, and I would like, other people to share their experiences and stuff like that. Like, I try to keep it as general as possible because we have a various fields. So anyway, for starters, Sudesh, I would love you to host the next session. Teach me about, Indian philosophy and the true Indian history, kind of a thing.
So that's a very good idea, Mohan. I think he's the boss, so we need to listen to Sudesh. But again, thank you. Let me just give my 2 cents. Wonderful start, Mohan. Congratulations, and then good to see you in this role. And then I know, yeah, as you said, like some of our friends are not in this field, but who are in this field like us, we truly enjoyed what you have said. And then it makes a lot of sense. And then the design ideas, the evangelizing our ideas in the group, and those are all very helpful. And then I know that we know that, but we don't really pay attention. But this really helps, and then keeps us like motivating and reading the books. Again, like fellows, like Sam said, we all forgot to read books from engineering. That's what I did. But now we are bringing that up, and I think.
Badri, I didn't read then, Badri, so I'm making up like.
No, but that this is really helpful, man. This is helpful.
I think above all, I really loved seeing all of our friends, faces together in so long.
Yeah, true.
Chala anandanga undi. It's really good.